It happened at exactly 3:09 a.m. The baby monitor, which had been silent all night, suddenly crackled to life with a soft, melodic sound. My wife jolted awake first, nudging me as a faint lullaby drifted through the speaker. Slow, almost mournful. The voice was feminine, warm even, but unmistakably unfamiliar. It wasn't a radio signal or interference. It was too clear, too close. We sat upright, staring at each other, frozen. The lullaby continued for 20 seconds, each note wrapping around us like a cold fog. Then silence. My wife whispered, "That wasn't from a neighbor, was it?" I didn't answer. I was already getting up. I rushed to the nursery. The door creaked slightly as I opened it. Our daughter was there in her crib, exactly as we had left her, sleeping peacefully. Alone. I scanned the room. Nothing. No open windows. No signs of anyone having entered. The air was cold, though much colder than the rest of the house. I checked the monitor camera. Nothing recorded. Just our daughter, sleeping, shifting lightly beneath her blanket. No movement. No sound. As I stood there, I felt something, not quite fear, not quite confusion, but a strange, sinking weight in my chest, like something was out of place. Back in bed, we tried to reason with it. Maybe it was a radio signal, or a strange electrical glitch. Maybe the monitor picked up a sound from a passing car, or someone outside. But the voice had sounded so close, like it was right next to the crib, and the way it sang, like it was meant for her. That morning, we brushed it off, tried to laugh about it, as if it were one of those creepy but explainable things. But I couldn't forget the melody. It clung to my memory like a smell you can't wash off. That night, I found myself staring at the monitor long after my wife fell asleep, watching, waiting, hoping I'd imagined it. But deep down, I knew this house had just told us something we weren't ready to hear. 3 weeks earlier, we were standing on the front porch of what we thought would be our forever home. It was everything we had dreamed of, an old colonial house on a quiet tree-lined street, with ivy climbing the brick walls and tall windows that spilled sunlight into every room. We didn't care about the creaky floors or the outdated fixtures. This house felt warm. It felt like a fresh start. Our daughter had just turned 6 months, and after months in a cramped apartment, we were ready to give her space, quiet, and safety. The nursery was the room that sold it to us. It was painted in soft, faded yellow with hand-carved molding along the ceiling. A single large window faced east, letting the sun rise in each morning like a gentle wake-up call. We set up her crib in the corner, positioned a rocking chair by the window, and placed a baby monitor high on the shelf, facing everything. It felt like a sanctuary, still, protected. Those first nights in the new house were filled with exhausted joy. Late-night feedings, soft music, the occasional creak in the pipes. Normal sounds of settling home. We started a routine. Every evening, one of us would peek in on our daughter, make sure she was covered, and then we'd check the monitor before heading to bed. It became a small ritual, something that helped us sleep. My wife, Emily, would often sit in the nursery a little longer, humming quietly while our daughter drifted off. "She sleeps better when there's music," she told me. I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. Even the silence in this house seemed gentle. But then there were the little things we didn't talk about at first, like the way the nursery door would sometimes creak open, even when we were sure we closed it, or the faint sound of footsteps when we were downstairs. It was always easy to explain. It's an old house. It's settling. Maybe it's the wind. The first time I heard static from the baby monitor, it lasted only a second. A soft pop, then silence again. I didn't think much of it. But later that same night, the static returned, longer, louder. It fizzled into silence, just as I entered the room to check on her. Still, there was no real fear. Just curiosity. A strange edge to the air. We were too happy, too focused on our daughter, to let small oddities grow into worries. Until the lullaby. Now, those small moments felt like something else. Not harmless, not random, but warnings. The second time it happened, there was no lullaby, only whispers. It started the same way, a low crackle of static bleeding through the baby monitor around 3 in the morning. I was awake, scrolling to my phone in bed, unable to sleep. Emily was beside me, breathing deeply, lost in sleep. I was about to turn the monitor volume down when I heard it, soft, deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. Whispers. At first, they were unintelligible, like words spoken just below the threshold of comprehension. But as I leaned in, heart racing, I began to pick out fragments. Don't let her cry. She's not yours. She remembers. I sat there, gripping the monitor so tightly it creaked under my fingers. The voice wasn't mine, wasn't Emily's, wasn't anything I'd heard before. It had a roughness, like someone who had been crying for days. And it wasn't coming from far away. It was close, very close. I shook Emily awake. She blinked at me in confusion, then heard it too, her face drained of color. Without speaking, we ran to the nursery. Our daughter was asleep, again, quiet, peaceful. The monitor in my hand buzzed for a moment, then went completely silent. The room was cold again, sharply colder than the hallway we'd just come from. I checked the windows. Still shut. No draft. Emily wanted to unplug the monitor that night. She stood holding it like it might bite her. I told her we should keep it, just in case. Maybe there was something wrong with the signal. Maybe someone nearby had a baby monitor broadcasting on the same frequency. But I didn't believe that. Not really. The next day, I bought a second monitor. A better one. High-definition night vision. Two-way audio. I set it up in the nursery alongside the old one, facing the crib. I wanted to record everything. I needed proof. Not just to convince Emily, but to convince myself I wasn't going insane. That night, we both stayed up, watching the feed from the new monitor on my laptop. Hours passed. Nothing. Then at 3:09 a.m., it happened. Static burst across the screen. For exactly 3 seconds, the image distorted into digital noise. Then it snapped back into focus. And standing next to the crib, clearly visible, was a woman. She was bent over, one hand resting on the crib rail, the other reaching in slowly toward our daughter. Her face was partially hidden by tangled, dark hair. She wore a nightgown, old and frayed, like it hadn't been washed in years. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was humming. We ran into the nursery so fast we nearly tore the door off the hinges. But the room was empty. Our daughter was asleep, unmoved. The monitor was cold to the touch. Ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. Emily cried that night. I didn't. I couldn't. I was too busy watching the footage again. And again. And again. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't sleep. I couldn't shake the image of the woman from the monitor. Her presence felt burned into the screen, like she had left something behind. Emily tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a shadow, or a trick of the camera. But her voice trembled when she said it. She didn't believe it either. So I started digging. I searched for records on the house. City archives, newspaper clippings, anything that could give us a reason for what we were seeing. I found the original property listing buried in a real estate database. It had changed hands more than 5 times in the last 15 years. No family had stayed longer than 2. The reasons for moving were vague. Job relocation, downsizing, unexpected financial issues. But the pattern was clear. People left this house quickly. Then I found her, Margaret Cole. She had lived here in 1972, back when the house was newly renovated and freshly painted. Her name appeared in a public record about a missing infant. Her daughter, Caroline, vanished from her crib one night. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No evidence. Margaret insisted her baby had been taken by someone through the walls. The police dismissed her claims as grief-fueled hysteria. Friends and neighbors described her as mentally unstable, saying she was never the same after the birth. She was institutionalized 1 year later. I found one surviving image of her, a grainy black and white photo from a local news clipping. The hair, the nightgown, the distant, heavy eyes. It was her, the woman from the monitor. A chill ran through me as I stared at her face, not because I recognized her, but because I saw something else. Not madness, not confusion. Grief. I tracked down a scanned copy of one of her journals, preserved in an old archive of psychological case studies. In it, she wrote endlessly about her daughter. Caroline's laughter, her scent, her tiny hands reaching through the crib bars. And then, about the nights after she vanished. I still hear her, she wrote. She cries through the walls. The monitor whispers to me, and I whisper back. They think I'm crazy, but I know the truth. She was taken, not lost. At the very end of the journal, the ink faded into a smudged scrawl. I just want her back. Give her back to me. I showed her to Emily that night. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, what if she never left? That evening, I placed both monitors side by side in the nursery. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor outside the door, listening through headphones, waiting, watching. And at 3:09 a.m., I heard Margaret's voice, whispering, Capitulo for finalizado, 500 palavras. Decide que eu continuo como capítulo 5? Você diz. Continue. O chat GPT diz. Chat broderista. Chapter 5. The Night of Screams. 500 words. I told Emily to sleep in the guest room. She didn't argue. The weight in the house had grown unbearable, thick, almost physical. Every creak felt purposeful. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. That night, I sat in front of the laptop again, headphones over my ears, the two baby monitors feeding directly into the screen. I had set up motion detection, infrared night vision, and audio capture. I was ready, or so I thought. The house was silent until 3:09 a.m. As if on cue, the monitor crackled. But this time, it wasn't whispers. It wasn't humming. It was screaming. My daughter's voice, shattering, raw, panicked, exploded through the speakers. I shot to my feet. The screen flashed red. The nursery door opened slowly on camera, though I knew it had been shut. A figure stepped inside. It was Margaret, but she wasn't leaning gently over the crib this time. She moved with jerks, like a puppet pulled on invisible strings. Her nightgown fluttered as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. Her face, half visible now, was pale and soaked in tears. She walked straight to the crib and placed both hands on the rails. The crib shook violently. On the screen, I saw my daughter sitting up, crying, reaching for something above her. Then, in a blink, the screen went black. I ran. The hallway felt twice as long, the air heavy and electric, as if the walls themselves were watching. I burst into the nursery, heart pounding, but what I saw stopped me cold. My daughter was there, silent now, lying back in her crib, wide-eyed and staring at the ceiling. In her hands was something we didn't own, a lace cloth, frayed and yellowed with age. Delicate and old, it looked handmade, like something from another century. Emily rushed in behind me, screaming her name, scooping her up in her arms. The temperature in the room dropped, so fast our breath came out in puffs. My skin prickled. The monitors were buzzing again. Both screens showed static. Then, faintly through the static, Margaret's voice. She's mine. You took her. Emily began to cry, rocking our daughter tightly against her chest. I pulled the lace cloth from her hands. It was cold, damp. It smelled like soil and something older, something dead. We left the nursery that night, locked the door, took the monitors down. For a moment, we considered calling someone, a priest, maybe, but what would we say? That a ghost was trying to take our daughter? No one would believe us, but I believed it now. All of it. Margaret never left. Her sorrow had seeped into walls, into the air, into the very fabric of the house. And now she had reached out, not just to be heard, but to take back what she believed was hers. And I was terrified that next time she might succeed. I told Emily to sleep in the guest room. She didn't argue. The weight in the house had grown unbearable, thick, almost physical. Every creak felt purposeful. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. That night, I sat in front of the laptop again, headphones over my ears, the two baby monitors feeding directly into the screen. I had set up motion detection, infrared night vision, and audio capture. I was ready, or so I thought. The house was silent until 3:09 a.m. As if on cue, the monitor crackled. But this time it wasn't whispers. It wasn't humming. It was screaming. My daughter's voice, shattering raw, panicked, exploded through the speakers. I shot to my feet. The screen flashed red. The nursery door opened slowly on camera, though I knew it had been shut. A figure stepped inside. It was Margaret, but she wasn't leaning gently over the crib this time. She moved with jerks, like a puppet pulled on invisible strings. Her nightgown fluttered, as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. Her face, half visible now, was pale and soaked in tears. She walked straight to the crib and placed both hands on the rails. The crib shook violently. On the screen, I saw my daughter sitting up, crying, reaching for something above her. Then, in a blink, the screen went black. I ran. The hallway felt twice as long, the air heavy and electric, as if the walls themselves were watching. I burst into the nursery, heart pounding, but what I saw stopped me cold. My daughter was there, silent now, lying back in her crib, wide-eyed and staring at the ceiling. In her hands was something we didn't own, a lace cloth frayed and yellowed with age. Delicate and old, it looked handmade, like something from another century. Emily rushed in behind me, screaming her name, scooping her up in her arms. The temperature in the room dropped, so fast our breath came out in puffs. My skin prickled. The monitors were buzzing again. Both screens showed static. Then, faintly, through the static, Margaret's voice. "She's mine. You took her." Emily began to cry, rocking our daughter tightly against her chest. I pulled the lace cloth from her hands. It was cold, damp. It smelled like soil and something older, something dead. We left the nursery that night, locked the door, took the monitors down. For a moment, we considered calling someone, a priest, maybe, but what would we say? That a ghost was trying to take our daughter? No one would believe us. But I believed it now. All of it. Margaret never left. Her sorrow had seeped into the walls, into the air, into the very fabric of the house. And now she had reached out, not just to be heard, but to take back what she believed was hers. And I was terrified that next time she might succeed. We didn't enter the nursery for days. The door stayed locked, and every time I passed by, I felt something press against my chest, like the air was thicker there, heavier. Emily refused to be alone upstairs. She slept with our daughter in the guest room, door open, lights on. Neither of us spoke about the voice again or the woman. We didn't have to. She was still here. We felt her. I burned the lace cloth. I stood in the backyard, under the gray sky, and watched the fragile fabric crumble into ash. It screamed, not aloud, but inside me. The sound was in my ears, but behind them, like grief echoing through bone. That night, I dreamed of Margaret. She stood in the corner of the nursery, humming her lullaby. But this time, I saw her face clearly. She was empty. Her eyes were endless hollows, dark and infinite. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just waited. I woke gasping. That same day, I made a decision. I returned to the archive where I'd found Margaret's journal and requested the sealed boxes from her psychiatric evaluation. The staff was reluctant, but after some pressure and a story about family research, they let me access a portion of the records. In the final file, scribbled in the margins of her therapy logs, were her last recorded words before she died. "Caroline is still crying. They promised me I'd get her back if I stayed. But she doesn't recognize me anymore." I stared at those words for a long time. A terrible thought began to bloom in me. What if Margaret had made a deal? What if this wasn't just grief or madness, but something older, deeper, something the house had offered her in her pain? A promise of reunion at a cost? That night, I set up a chair in the nursery and waited. At exactly 3:09 a.m., the door creaked open, not from behind me, but in the monitor feed on my phone. Even though I was sitting right there, the room grew colder. My breath fogged, and then from behind me, "I want her back." I turned slowly. Margaret stood in the doorway, translucent, flickering, her face twisting between sorrow and rage. "I can't," I said. "She's not yours." Her expression didn't change. "You took mine." She moved closer, not walking, but gliding, her hands reaching out, not toward me, but toward the crib behind me, even though it was empty. "I didn't take her," I said, "but I can help you find her." The room pulsed once, like the house itself was listening, and Margaret stopped. After that night, the presence in the house shifted. Margaret's visits became less frequent, quieter, almost hesitant. It was as if our silent bargain had given her something she needed, a fragile hope. I dove deeper into the records, desperate to understand what help meant. The psychiatric files revealed more than just her grief. Margaret had been part of a secretive local circle, a group obsessed with ancient folklore. Stories about spirits trapped between worlds, mothers who refused to let go of their children, and bargains made with entities older than memory. The journal hinted she had sought a ritual, an arcane way to reach her daughter beyond death. But there was a catch. The ritual demanded a sacrifice, a living bond to replace the lost child. Margaret believed she could transfer her grief into an object, a token that would hold the child's spirit, allowing her to keep Caroline alive somewhere between worlds. That token, I realized, was the lace cloth we'd burned. Destroying it had disrupted the bond, but also angered her spirit, her sorrow turning into rage. That night, I confronted Emily with what I had learned. She listened silently, fear and understanding mingling in her eyes. "We have to finish this," she whispered, "for our daughter's sake." We decided to consult a local expert, an elderly woman known for her knowledge of the occult and the house's history. Her name was Mrs. Dalton, a recluse who lived 3 blocks away. When we visited, she barely blinked at our story but nodded gravely. "The house remembers," Mrs. Dalton said. "It holds pain like a wound that never heals. Margaret's spirit is tied to her grief, and until it's resolved, she will linger. But she's not evil, just desperate." She explained the ritual to sever the bond, a ceremonial farewell, a release of the spirit tied to the token, allowing Margaret's grief to pass on. But it required courage in confronting the past fully. That evening, back home, I set up the space in the nursery for the ritual. Candles, herbs, and the last remnants of the lace cloth's ashes. Emily held our daughter, close as the house seemed to hold its breath. As we began, a whisper floated through the air. Not angry this time, but sorrowful. "Thank you." The temperature warmed. The oppressive weight lifted. And for the first time since we moved in, the nursery felt peaceful. Margaret was gone, or so we hoped. The morning after the ritual, the house was eerily quiet. The usual creaks and groans that had become part of our nights were gone. The air felt lighter, as if the thick fog had finally lifted. Emily and I exchanged cautious glances, both hesitant to believe the nightmare was truly over. We entered the nursery together, holding hands tightly. Our daughter lay peacefully in her crib, the soft morning light bathing the room in warmth. The baby monitor sat untouched on the shelf, silent and lifeless. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with exhaustion that had been building for weeks. But beneath that relief lurked an unshakable unease. While the presence had left, the memories and the scars remained. I noticed how Emily avoided looking at the nursery door, how her smiles were tinged with exhaustion. And I, too, felt the weight of what we'd endured pressing on my chest, a subtle but persistent ache. Days turned into weeks. Life resumed a fragile normalcy. Our daughter laughed more, slept better. The monitors collected dust. Yet every so often, in the quiet moments before sleep, I would swear I heard a faint humming, a distant lullaby carried on the breeze, like a ghost's farewell. Emily and I talked less about the house. We focused on the future, on healing. But sometimes when the night is still and the world is asleep, I find myself staring at the empty nursery door, wondering if some part of Margaret's sorrow lingers, watching, waiting, just beyond the veil. Because grief, I learned, doesn't vanish. It changes form. It hides in shadows and whispers in the spaces between heartbeats. And sometimes it finds a way back in. Months passed, and the house slowly felt more like home again. Emily and I began to relax, believing the nightmare had ended. Our daughter grew healthier by the day, her laughter filling the rooms we once feared. The nursery, now painted a gentle cream, became a place of comfort rather than dread. But one night, as a storm raged outside, everything changed. At exactly 3:09 a.m., the power flickered and died. The house plunged into darkness. I reached for my phone, the only light source, and my heart stopped as I heard it. Soft crying coming from a nursery. Emily stirred beside me, eyes wide in the dark. The crying grew louder, more desperate. I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs, every step heavy with fear. I pushed open the nursery door, beam cutting through the shadows. The crib was empty, but on the floor lay a single item, an old, frayed lace cloth, identical to the one we had burned months ago. The crying stopped abruptly. I picked up the cloth, cold and damp in my hands. A whisper floated on the air. "I'm still here." The lace cloth in my hands felt like a weight from another time, heavier than before. Emily was awake now, standing in the doorway, her face pale but resolute. We knew what this meant. Margaret's sorrow had never truly left. She was reaching out one last time, desperate for closure, or perhaps something more. We gathered what little courage we had and prepared for a final ritual, one meant to sever the last ties that bound her spirit to our home. Mrs. Dalton's instructions echoed in my mind. This is the true farewell, not just for her, but for all of you. Candles flickered as we arranged the ashes, the lace cloth, and the herbs in a circle. Our daughter slept quietly nearby, unaware of the storm of emotion swirling around her. We began the chant Mrs. Dalton had taught us, voices steady despite the chill creeping through the room. The air thickened, the shadows deepened, and then the room grew still, so still it felt as though the house itself was holding its breath. From the darkness emerged a figure, Margaret. Her face was softer now, the rage and grief replaced by a weary acceptance. She reached out to us, not with menace, but with a mother's longing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted her back." We nodded, tears in our eyes, understanding the pain that had bound her here. Slowly, she faded, the shadows dissolving with her. The chill lifted. The house sighed, finally at peace. That morning, the nursery felt warm and inviting. The monitors were silent, but so were the whispers. Margaret was gone, and this time we believed it was forever.